Yeah, I can understand. Are you still in the UH law job? That was the last time we talked, wasn't it?
Yeah, no. So finished the law school. That was a rapid, huge success, and then went back to Texas A&M, and we built an indoor track and field stadium for the A&M track team. We wrapped that up back in November, and then in November of 23 broke ground back at U of H on a new football operations building and a stadium expansion. So U of H football made a move to the Big 12, and
Yeah,
now they got some Big 12 money and they got to keep up with the Joneses. So
there we go. So it's funny. Some people refer to time in years. You can refer to time in number of projects. It's been two
that's
and a half projects since we last chatted.
yeah, that's correct. I can tell you when my kids were born, what job I was working on, what job I was working on when I got married.
Yeah,
So
right. Well, I appreciate you taking some time, Wes. The point of maybe this podcast and the series of podcasts is really to kind of talk with the folks actually doing the work and kind of run by some topics that are being discussed in various forums and
sure,
hear from the folks that normally kind of don't get the mic to speak about those topics, right? And so, um, one of the things that the industry is talking about a lot is labor shortage, right? And there's a macro kind of economic perspective on the different levers of how that's being impacted. But are you experiencing that at a job level? Like, what does that look like for you right now?
as far as the labor shortages, I mean
Yeah.
that's 100% real. Everybody's hiring, dude. I mean everybody is hiring. There's still a good amount of unskilled labor available, but skilled labor is. I mean, guys are able to name their price these days. I mean, a good plumber, a good electrician, a good carpenter, and that's on the field side, on the craft side. Within the management side, project engineers, assistant superintendents, field engineers. I mean, we can't hire enough. So it's a great time to be in construction, but it's also a hard time too. It's a little nerve wracking. Sometimes it makes you
Yeah.
wonder what's down the road and what's going to change, etc. So
Have you seen a lot of kind of hopping in between? So, like, you start with the project team, or you start with a set of trade partners, and folks just kind of drop off and pop up in different locations?
yeah, that's correct. And Houston is a ginormous city, right? It's what the fourth
Yeah.
largest in the country, and construction within Houston, specifically commercial construction, man, it's a small world. And a lot of the younger guys I've had to coach and advise over the years of don't burn that bridge, dude, because we'll
Yep.
be back around soon. We might be wearing
Yeah.
different color hard hats the next time we see each other, but it's a small world. So and at the craft level, that's always an issue as well. I mean, most of our craft workers are, they'll jump ship for 25 cents or 50 cents more an hour somewhere else. What's changed, and you can call it a good thing, is I'm always anything that brings wages up for some of these craft workers is fantastic, and I'm all for it.
Mm.
And at the same time, though, what's changed is that a lot of these businesses, a lot of these companies are having to find other ways to retain people, and not just a dollar figure. So you end up with a whole, hey, I'm turning in my notice. Well, where are you going? Oh, over here they're paying me 50 cents more, and okay, well I'll give you 75 cents. That works to an extent, but it's having to be creative with a culture, making it a place that guys want to work, a place that guys want to stay. Management is being a lot more polite, for lack of a better terms, of being reasonable about overtime hours or PTO or sick pay. So
Yep.
it's a good thing. I mean, it's making the quality of life better for the craft worker. So
Well, and I think it's an interesting point of, I think we often look at some of these challenges through the lens of the organization, but to your point, it's from the organization all the way down to the project level of what are the incentives, what are the strategies from a culture standpoint to try and retain people, right?
right, correct.
So, so another kind of maybe layer or angle to that story is, the introduction of AI and robotics, and you've got dusty robotics for automated layout, rugged. You've got some introduction of hardware that is attempting to kind of offset on-site labor. Have you started to interact with any of that? And maybe what's your kind of high level opinions on that category?
Construction, for whatever reason, has always been a little bit, pushback when it comes to technology. But there's been some that
Yep.
the biggest thing is it just takes a really long time for our industry to accept it. And it's not just so much to accept it, it's more about it takes a long time for technology to become practical in the field, right? A lot of these advancements in AI and robotics and stuff like that is great for a factory production setting, to where if we're building wall panels or we're assembling widgets on a shop floor in an enclosed building in a warehouse, like it makes sense. But on a construction site where it changes every single day, it's been really hard. One of the few, robotic type technologies that have become normal now is total stations, right? Robotic total stations are a big deal. It used to be, you had a guy behind a transit, and then you probably had you had a rod man and you had a chain man, and it took three guys to go lay out a building. It took 30 minutes to get set up on your control point, another 30 minutes to do your backside, and then you're paranoid all day long, constantly watching your transit to make sure it wasn't bumped or moved, or having to reshoot after break time. Now you go out and set up a robot, and then a guy just walks around with a prism pole and a GPS, and he can lay out everything within a few hours. So that's one that has really made advancements, and we use regularly. So just think about roughening upper decks on a building. Used to be once the carpenters or the ironworkers got that first deck down, the engineers had to go up there and pop lines, and everybody was measuring out there with, triangulating points with a couple of tape measures and a chain, and putting their marks. And it would take all day long to do the layout, and then another couple of days to rough it in. Well, now the transit guy, the Trimble guy, gets up there early in the morning, and by the time the craft workers show up at 7 a.m., he's got a whole deck laid out. So that is a big one that's made a lot of advancement.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think to your previous point, I think my thesis has always been kind of in as a retort to kind of the McKinsey perspective of tech averse elements in the industry. It's there in a lot of ways. Tech hasn't advanced to the point of being able to be readily used by the industry, right? And so it was
Right.
a bad tech problem rather than a tech averse problem, in my opinion, for many years. I think that's starting to change. But to your point, there's adaptations of those technologies that are now being readily accepted into these different workflows, which I think is interesting. Have you used Dusty or Rugged or any of those yet?
What was that?
Have you used Dusty Robotics, like the little robot that does kind of prints out the layout lines? Not yet.
No, no, we have not used that. I was looking a while back. I was at World of Concrete, I guess, 2 years ago, and Hilti had a robot that kind of drives around, and it would drill inserts, into a concrete
Yep.
deck, right? So before you do roughing, and again, it's like, man, that's really cool. But like anything else, is it cost justifiable? How much does that machine cost? And it's got a pretty penny to it. Now it's
Yep.
newly developed, and I'm sure at some point we're going to see it pretty normal on a job, but it takes a while. And there's two things that we look at before we really make major investments into tech or something like that. Is number one, does it make the job safer, right? And so we can say that we're now eliminating what used to be a huge risk, whether it be a fall protection or a confined space or something like that. If we can eliminate a risk for a worker, we're normally all in on that level of investment. And then the other one is it going to be profitable for us? And if it's not profitable, so if it doesn't reduce injuries and it's not really profitable, then we're not going to use it. But what typically happens, like anything else, the new developed is some crazy, far-fetched future Star Trek idea, and it's like, well, this will never be practical. And then at some point, that pendulum comes back, and it finds a happy medium of okay, here's the actual use for it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, spot on. So we talked a little bit about the hardware side. It seems like every day there's kind of the introduction of a new piece of software in the construction tech space. Has there been any new software that you've seen in the last few years that you've just been thought, man, that really meets a need for me?
on the field side, I wouldn't say anything that new. We utilize programs like a Plan Grid, a BIM 360, a Procore, and a lot of those for issue tracking. That's one that is now readily and very common space. And I mean, all the way down to the point that we've got carpenters on the job site that have an iPad that are going through, correcting a deficiency log, right? with the level of inspection that we have on some of my projects and the so the multitude of local inspectors from the authority having jurisdiction to fire marshals to engineers to their consultants to the architect to testing labs. I mean, there's so many different people that watch a job, and we get issued a report, and that report might have 4 or 5 deficient items. And if you don't catch those and don't get them corrected ASAP, then there's no sign off period. And all of a sudden, concrete got poured, sheetrock got hung, and it's like, well, that ever get fixed? Well, I don't know. We got to go cut it back open. So some of these programs used for tracking issues is a big deal. And that's been an advancement of no T's uncrossed and no I's undotted, right? And it's also just kind of made jobs a lot more streamlined and efficient. And you can identify problem child, right? Like, so on large projects where there might be hundreds or thousands of issues, I can actually filter it by areas or by craft or by trade. And okay, the electrician's having a hard time getting his stuff signed off. We need to go focus there. So that's the software. Outside of that, your AutoCADs and your Revits and things that are used like that for drawing and for design, for BIM modeling. I don't get too involved in that. I don't run those programs. I've got guys that do. They keep up with the latest and greatest. But as far as in the field, I don't have those programs on my computer, and even if I did, I wouldn't know how to use them or have the time to learn how to use them. But we have a whole VDC department that always has the latest and greatest stuff, and those guys are all over it.
Yep. One of the conversations that I've had with a few people is if we look at like technology in terms of the outcomes it should produce, ultimately at some point it should start improving the lives of field team members, right? And I think you could look at, in the categories of safety or quality management, there have been some improvements, but it's 2024. You still working 6 to 6? Like have you seen improvements in your quality of day to day?
Man, it's a double-edged sword, right? So you can say yes, that some of these things have made our jobs easier. They've made our jobs safer. They've streamlined stuff. But the problem is that as things become more efficient, schedules become shorter, right? And the other one is the full connectivity, right? I mean, this device I'm holding right now to do this podcast with you can do anything in the world. And the problem is when I go home, the damn thing is still in my hand and the emails are still popping up. And, so yes, tech has improved our life on the job of making things easier and streamlined, but it hasn't allowed us to walk away from work. And so that's a cultural shift. We really try to push that. Those are some of those things I'm talking about that organizations are trying to do to maintain employee satisfaction and health and just overall balanced life is, hey man, when you leave at 5:30 or 6 or whatever time we get done for the day, turn the phone off, ignore the emails. You don't have to respond the next morning, and that's up to the individual to do that. But again, at the same time, these things make our life easier, but they've also made us more connected, right? I kind of admire my dad and my grandpa who worked construction, that when they left the job, it was over. They didn't, there was no way to be in touch with it until the next day. So.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. And it's interesting that it does kind of come back to leadership around culture, right? Even at a project level. Because I think ultimately, like, technology is always going to pursue productivity gains. And so it does come down to human decisions around how to engage with that. And I think, from an industry standpoint, I think we're maybe even asking the wrong question of like, hey, tech, can you solve these problems and lead to these kind of standard of living improvements? But I think ultimately technology is never going to be incentivized to do that. It's going to take humans like yourself to lead a project team in a different way.
Correct. That's correct. And construction is one of the, I don't know, I look at construction as one of the last industries of the Wild West, right? Kind of oil field and some of those other ones, is that you don't need advanced degrees to do this. This is still one of the few places that a common man, a common woman with no skill set whatsoever can walk on a job, get hired, and within a couple of years go through an apprenticeship program and develop a great career, and that's fantastic. But at the same time, that it does make things tougher. Our market is highly competitive. We bid on projects against especially in Houston. We're so big. I mean, every national general contractor has a presence in Houston, Texas. So we might, be competing against 15 or 20 other GCs for a job. And at the end of the day, the owner's still selecting based off of schedule, price, and reputation. But price is still one of the biggest drivers, right? And
Yeah.
what better way to make a job cheaper than when they say, hey, this is a 30-month project and you're a little bit more expensive than your competitors, but you go, hey, I'll do it in 28 months instead of 30. They go, okay, great. So we just work ourselves out of a job. So there's also industry groups, right? Associations of general contractors and other organizations like that where we try to, tackle some of those bigger issues. But again,
Yeah.
it's still the Wild West out there building buildings.
What do you think is one thing that like the narrative on construction is just really inaccurate? Like whether it's the conversation just happening in LinkedIn or just outside perspective on commercial construction. Like what do you think is just one or two things that people get wrong?
Well, I mean, just the stereotype of the contractor, right? The dirty guy that smokes and drinks too much, sitting in his pickup truck, and they just kind of 30 guys standing around on a job site watching one man work, and it's a funny stereotype. I mean, we joke about it all the time, but construction is a very advanced industry these days, and
Yep.
there's been a lot of shifts and a lot of changes. To put more onus on the contractor. So, and what I'm getting there is like design assist projects, right? So, as owners want jobs built faster, it doesn't always necessarily mean that we build it faster, but sometimes it means that we deliver the overall project faster. So, it used to be if you needed to build a new office building, you would go out and hire an architect. And that architect might take a year or two to draw it, right? And then you had to go through surveying and everything else. Well, then you bid it, and then you hired a contractor, then they would build it. And like overall, that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. So how do you shorten that? So, well, let's hire the contractor early on during design so that he can start bidding it while we're doing it, right? And so we've come up with new alternative delivery methods for owners, right? So a construction manager, a risk style contract, or something else. Well, now design build is a big one, right? To where the general contractor is hiring an architect. So now the owner is saying that, hey, I want them drawing it and you building it at the same time, right? I don't want to have to wait until all the drawings are complete. So some of those are the advancements, and what that's done is it's coined the term construction professionals now, right? I mean, we do a lot more than just pour the concrete and hang the iron. We're now involved in hiring the design consultants and doing the surveys
Yep.
and doing the engineering behind it. And even with our advanced trades, our electricians, our plumbers, our mechanical guys and stuff like that, they now have in-house engineering, right? So the same thing is that you might have a mechanical engineer that kind of gives a parameter to, we want a building that has X amount of cooling in it and at this efficiency rating. And all they do is give you these high level parameters. And then our subcontractor will hire their own engineer or their in-house engineering to fully design and develop the system. So, the old adage that, the contractor that's just the dirty guy sitting in the back of the truck that poured concrete all day long is starting to change. And it's a more advanced degree. And the same thing on the general
Yep.
contractor side. Most of the superintendents we're hiring now are college educated. I mean, these guys have advanced degrees from major universities because that's just the shift in the industry.
Well, and I think to your point, it's an industry that requires problem solvers, and the problems are becoming more and more complex and complicated. So it requires a different type of brain, right? And I think,
Correct.
um, it's also something where like I have three young boys, right? And I would love for them to get in construction, and as they analyze and weigh, higher level education versus going into being an apprentice, I think that equation is becoming pretty interesting, right? Where it's like, I would love one of my boys to go and apprentice for you and learn a trade specifically and maybe then learn the business side and go start his own company, right? And I think there's so many
Right.
opportunities in this industry for folks who have a work ethic and know and understand a trade. And as we look at where maybe society wants to grow into, and whether you're talking plans for the metaverse or AI, all of it requires a quantity of infrastructure that we don't have the people to build it right now. And so it's interesting for me always to read these articles about what the world looks like in 5, 10 years, knowing the quantity of people it's going to require to build that world. And so I think, one of the points of these conversations too is, like you said, like elevate the conversation around what is a construction professional in this year. And I think to your point, it's a higher level, it's a high level individual who's able to get a lot done in a variety of different ways.
Totally agreed.
So what before we leave the tech conversation, I feel like you're the kind of persona that probably gets hit up for all kinds of like, hey, can we do a pilot of our technology on your on and I've asked you that question before in a different seat. And you were very generous and great to work with. But what goes through your mind when software companies reach out about piloting technologies on your site?
Um, to be honest with you, I'm typically pretty adverse to it. I don't want to do it. A lot of times it's, and it's not necessarily because I don't want to accept the technology. Is that you get hit with so much, right? And then like constant sales as well, right? Everything feels like another sales pitch. I mean, I have guys lined up outside my trailer every day trying to, get our business as a vendor to buy, 2x4s from,
Yeah.
or as a vendor to rent, equipment from, etc. And so you slowly grow calloused towards anybody that feels like they're pushing something on you. But then the other side of it too is that on the tech side of things, I kind of go, okay, man, you got 60 seconds to give me a spiel. And I want to see, is this something I'm actually going to try to utilize on the field, or is this just another thing that it was a great idea, it doesn't really work, and I'm never going to invest in it. So I'm typically kind of standoffish towards it.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe I've already asked this question, but has there been any pilots in the last 12 months that you thought like, well, that did what it said was going to do?
Ooh, off
You
the
can
top
say
of my
no.
head, yeah, off the top of my head right now, Steven, I can't think of one. So,
Yeah.
but again, so the organization I work for now, we have a whole department, our virtual design and construction department, our
Yep.
VDC group, and we've got quite a few people that work within that group, and they do a really good job of vetting through the nonsense for us, and so a lot of times when one of the guys from my VDC group comes to me and says, "Hey, man, I know you're not the tech guy, but we've been talking to these dudes. They have this new device. It does X, Y, and Z. We really think it might, be worthwhile." I tend to listen to them, and that's kind of the way our organization is set up. Is that don't go bother the field team with it. Take it to the VDC group. Let them do the call process, and by the time it makes it through them, it might actually be something that's worthwhile, right? So drone deploy is actually a new one. Now that I sit here thinking about it, our VDC group has started using drone deploy, and they come and fly our job site as often as I need them to, and that's been really beneficial, right? Not just internally with
Yep.
layout, with planning and coordination, but we've done it on jobs like I was mentioning, CM risk projects where we're very involved early in the design. Right away, we're still waiting on the surveyor to get out there, and I'm like, well, let me get my VDC group to go fly the drone, and that way we can go ahead and get you, because very rarely do we do greenfield construction. We're always in the middle of the city or in the middle of some campus or wherever where we're having to demo something and interact with buildings around us, and right out of the gate, we can have that drone deployed software and have a model that's pretty damn accurate. Laser scan has been another big one too. I mean, the stadium project I'm working on right now, we came out and set up a laser scan and modeled the entire stadium, within a day. And we were able to provide that to the design team. So,
Yeah, that's cool. Maybe, sticking in the world of VDC, it's often said you're going to build twice, you might as well build digitally for at least one of them, right? And so have you seen maybe a maturing of that conversation around BIM VDC from like, I was the last project I was on as a PM was 2016, so it's been a few years, but in that kind of timeline, BIM really was clash detection, and it was like clash detection for scope that was relevant like 3 weeks ago. And so it was always like chasing relevancy.
yep.
But have you seen there starting to be more of like through pre-con and early uh, actually building digitally, thinking through how to leverage that digital environment for planning before you actually break ground? Like, are you seeing that transition?
Not that early yet, no. I have seen the BIM process really develop into something great that works well. And so, and outside of just clash detection, but full scale models, and really intricate BIM models where prefabrication is happening for that material, right? With very little rework in the field, so the pipe fitter will have a piece come out that's got 16 different bends welded to it and turns and everything else, and it goes up in the air right into place exactly where it's supposed to be. So I have seen that BIM process turn into prefabrication all the way to field install actually be successful, and not just successful, but highly successful. Now, prior to construction, not so much. We'll still do things for logistical planning, for craning the job, and stuff like that. We go do a job in the medical center in Houston, and you're just surrounded by ginormous buildings, and there's no space between you. And so we'll do those, either a laser scan or a drone deploy or something like that, and actually start developing of, hey, just because we can draw a building here doesn't mean that we can build the building here, right? And so early planning for cranes and stuff like that, yes.
Yeah. That's good to hear. I mean, I think that's definitely, you look at the different categories of innovation that are going to push the industry forward. I think that's definitely one of them, right?
Right.
What about, I mean, you talked a little bit about AI, but any instances of AI in your day to day that you find relevant?
So far, no. We have not really seen that happen on the job site level, and I'm not saying that our VDC group right now might be piloting something or might be looking at something that's out there,
Yep.
but it has not made it to one of Wes's projects yet. No.
Nice. Well, hey man, I appreciate you taking time with us, Wes. This is really fun, and I know you got a lot on your plate, so thank you.
Absolutely, man. It was a joy. Good catching up with you.
Any anything else we should talk about? Anything else on your mind that you want to tell the two listeners that we'll probably have early on this podcast?
No, at this moment, no. I mean, back to our conversation around the perspective, the perspective of construction and the industry as a whole. Is it is an advanced industry these days, and it's heading in that direction. I think it's a good
Yeah.
thing. We've seen it all the way from the craft workers, um, up through upper management guys, and there's a lot of talk around it today. I mean, there's guys like Mike Rowe running around just to name drop somebody, right? But that's kind of pushing for, hey, these are real
Yep.
jobs. These are real people. These are fantastic careers. My dad's an
Yep.
electrician. One of my grandpas was an iron worker. The other one was a truck driver, and they were proud of their craft, and then they made
Mm.
highly successful careers out of them. And I hope to do the same thing with my kids. So not everybody needs to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant. In fact, I think we have too many bankers and lawyers, to be honest with you, and we don't have enough builders. So I'd like to see America kind of
100%.
get back to that perspective of we build things and we make them better. So
Yeah, I love that message. Well, I appreciate it, Wes. Thank you.